send a letter to the supervisor signal. Any discussion? I guess we can't discuss that. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Resolutions from other counties, there were two in the packet. Any questions on those? I would like to bring, you want to do yours first?
No, I just wanted to talk to him. Sorry.
I'd like to bring number 13C, the consideration of contracting for a third-party administrator up at this time. Okay with that? Okay. Don, you going to lead that?
Sure.
Thank you. We had briefly talked at the last meeting about contracting with a third-party administrator for the ARPA funds. And we are bringing it back to you today, not as a presentation, but both gentlemen are here and they can do self-introductions to basically to answer any questions that you might have of them. From the staff's perspective, we are unanimously behind going with the third-party administrator and specifically with CLA. We believe that the product that they had is superior to anything that we have seen. The portal and also the fees that go along with that. So having a conversation with finance staff and treasurer and Kim and others, we really believe, we were looking at what the maximum cost would be. We really believe that if we were to contract with CLA, if the committee's desire is so, that we would contract for the first year. Most of the questions that we have, and because some of the ARPA funds are going to projects that are smaller, that are not county entities, so the questions that we have regarding reporting and any other questions that we might have, we're going to run into early on. So the majority of those consulting fees, the not to exceed fees, would be in the first year. We believe that it's very likely that after the first year, we probably wouldn't need any additional consulting. It was just the ability to continue to use the portal, which I believe, gentlemen, is $25,500 annually for the portal. So they're here today to answer your questions, not necessarily to give another full presentation. And we're wholeheartedly in support of moving forward with a third-party administrator. Those funds could be, for us to pay CLA, could come from the ARPA funds, so it's not money coming out of our levy to do that. And with that, I think I'll just turn it over to them and let them respond to questions.
Do you want me to approach the mic or?
Sure.
All right. So thank you for having us in, just to be available here to you for any questions. My name is Jake Linnell. I'm a principal in our Milwaukee office. I work exclusively in state and local government. I'm part of our ARPA consulting team that works across the country, but also here locally to work through many municipalities, exactly what you guys are going through in terms of ensuring that you maintain compliance with the funds, that you report properly to Treasury with those funds, and be available to you for. We're working better now. And be available as needed. And Tom is here with me as well. Tom's part of our digital team. His role is really more in finding those that have needs and questions about that work and bringing them to the team here to line up the technical resources with our municipalities that have that need for those technical resources. So as John mentioned, you have the information. I know we've seen detailed work with the portal, but happy to talk through any questions that you have or any of the specifics that you'd like to talk through.
So, I got a question. So since we're doing a long calculation of the 17 million rather than the 10 million, is it just a one-time reporting for the government, or we have to do it every quarter?
Your reporting is going to continue throughout the
Through 2026.
funds, yes.
And the other question is that if we're giving money to other municipalities or other organizations, is it our requirement, are we required to make sure that they're following in compliance with the ARPA funds government standard?
So that specific question actually has a couple of different layers to it. And that's something that we would work with your team on for each individual project, because there is consideration as to whether an entity is considered to be a subrecipient or a contractor or a beneficiary, and each of those different forms has different requirements as to what the county is responsible for versus what your subrecipient or contractor or beneficiary would be responsible for. So as John mentioned, some of that front end work, the early on questions, often involve review of the types of applications that you're considering taking from these other entities, and really defining what those responsibilities are between what the county has versus what the organization has.
Right, and if and you guys are just handling the federal portion, right? Now, if the state comes back, when the state comes, they could have extra paperwork as far as administrative costs, administrative requirements as well, right?
So because you're a direct recipient from Treasury, you're reporting directly to
All right.
Treasury.
So the state's not a liaison?
Right.
All right.
Other questions of the committee?
Under consulting hours needed, what is your estimate for Dodge County in terms of dollars? In addition to the $2,125 a month plus $25,500 per year average, I think what the county board's going to want to know is, okay, give us an estimate about what we anticipate the fees will be that first year above consulting fees.
Right. So the way we approach that, after discussing with John, we've set a not to exceed on the professional fees of $95,000, and there's a technology and client support fee on top of that of 5%. So it would keep your total all in underneath $100,000 as a not to exceed. So it is based on the time that goes into it and the various levels and roles. We came up with that not to exceed based on some of the other support we've been providing your counterparts across the state as well as across the country. And the way we manage that is by being very diligent about the way in which we structure the questions that are coming in, how we respond to them, the amount of time that we expect them to have, and as you identify projects that you're considering, proposing any type of potential impact that may have on those not to exceed fees. So it's really about just actively managing it and ensuring that if this is something that's a heavier lift, if you need us involved for that part, we're aware of it and we're budgeting that way for that portion of the project. Whereas if it's something that, county staff can lead the way on, and we're really just there for some milestones and checkpoints, that continues to keep your costs down. So we did not do a fixed fee quote because we feel like you should only be paying for the services that you need.
And that basically $100,000 cap, is that for 12-month periods in the time that we sign?
Yes,
And that's in addition to the $25,500 for the software?
yes, correct.
That's only 1 year?
The software?
No, the cap is only for 1 year.
That was the time period we discussed with your team as well, to say, you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time to get things started and moving, as well as get some flow to it. So yes, based on kind of being able to evaluate at that point, if we're going to continue on in a consulting role. But yeah, we identified a 1 year period as that not to exceed target.
From the day we sign the contracts.
Correct.
Right. So we're gonna-
Yeah, I was just going to add that, first of all, we believe that the majority of the costs would be, of the consulting costs would be within the first 6 months. It's highly likely that there'd be very, very minimal consulting costs after that period of time. Secondly, I wanted to make sure that you were all aware, is that this agreement would be on a month-to-month basis. and the county can withdraw whenever we want. We don't have to wait, for the full year to expire necessarily. Not that, we say that we're going to do that, but it's on a month-to-month basis. And then the other thing, in order to control costs, is there would be a single point of contact from the county to CLA, so that we're making sure whoever that individual is, they would be the only one that would be able to authorize any consulting hours, so therefore to control our costs.
The idea being that the subrecipient can't request consulting without going through us.
Correct. Correct. And the way that the portal is set up, there's several different layers of access that we can allow the subrecipients to access the portal. They wouldn't be able to get to see any other applicant's area of the grants, only their own specific ones. They would have access to it, but there'd be different layers of access. That is something that the county would be able to control as well.
Other questions from the committee? Supervisor Houchin,
Can I ask a question?
committee fine with that?
Does it matter how many projects we have? Because we could potentially be up to 26 projects within this next month. Does that affect the cost? And are our employees doing all the work and just asking you questions when they have questions? I don't understand exactly what you do.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
To respond to both here. So the not to exceed fee that we quoted is really based on the overall dollars that you're receiving from ARPA. And it's an estimate based on the level of complexity that you expect to have when you're receiving that much funds. So yes, it does get more complicated as you have more and more projects. And that's why it's important for us to work together with your team, so that if we were to do everything from start to finish, and you engaged in a lot of complex programs with a lot of subrecipient monitoring that required a lot of manual, phone calls and discussion with your participants, that time goes quickly, and so we have to plan accordingly to make sure that we're supporting you in the way that you need to be supported. So the complexity of the program does play into things. That's why we set it as a not to exceed and not a fixed fee. And as we actively talk through each of the projects and determine what the county has capacity to do internally, the more that you're able to do with fixed costs, the better. And then we're there to come alongside you as needed. And that's really what those consulting fees are for.
Thank you.
Other questions or thoughts from the committee? Thank you. What's your thoughts about the resolution that we have before us?
On 13C,
13C, yes.
because we did the requirements at the end of this month, the last month.
Stephanie, did you and Patty do the requirements so
Yeah.
far, right?
Pat, if you're talking about the reporting for the federal projects that are out there right now, yes, it took Patty and I 5 hours at two people at 5 hours when we were done with the reporting. It does get complicated as you got new projects that are coming in and you don't know what federal requirement they fall under, because every drop down has different requirements below it. And these rules and regulations, as Patty, I did not help her last time, she said they're changing. They're changing as we go along. And that's something CLA would definitely be able to help us with the changes and how do we go back and change our projects that we reported on previously. It's something
You talked to the new administrator that's coming on board, Duffy?
that I would defer to John. John had a conversation with Cameron Clapper about it, and that would be hearsay, but he said he would definitely was in favor of a third-party administrator to help us with the ARPA funds. with the number of projects that you have going on. When you started, you had 2 questions. That was something I would love to just have, is somebody to ask the question, to make sure we're doing it right. And once, a lot of these projects are the same projects, so once we get started, it would be the same process. We'd be able to answer the questions as we're reporting. Then we would only have to consult once there's a change in how that process has to be. So a lot of projects are the same, but there's a lot of questions about, because we do have a beneficiary example, and that would be PAVE. That's a pass-through that came through from the state, so their requirements are changing. But I'm doing the best I can and reading the requirements and following through, but I think if you have a specific point of contact who would communicate with CLA, I think if you say, you know, you're getting to the end of this, you're using more consulting fees than what, I definitely could work with you to make sure we're not spending anymore. I mean, you just have, when we're using them, it's like a premium. But we definitely need some guidance in, are we starting each project out correctly? That is the specific reason why Jim did not go ahead right away with CLA. He wanted to know how many projects we had. Now we're exceeding well above what Jim thought was something we could do internally. So we definitely need some help here, especially with the administrator coming on board. He's not up to speed yet. I'm gonna need somebody I can bounce some of these ideas off of how I should go forward and handle these projects. So I just think it's really a big liability for the county just to rely on me or other people on the ARPA staff to not really have any guidance in this area. So, sorry, I hope I answered your question.
John, what did the new, what did Mr. Clapper say?
Chairman was very supportive of us going with the third-party administrator, and we've had that conversation with him. He believes that the expertise that CLA could bring would be very beneficial to us. And the other thing that I didn't have a conversation with Cameron about was, and I've heard it from these gentlemen, and I heard it from other counties, there are counties out there across the country that are hiring 4 or 5 staff people to do the type of thing that they would be doing on a consulting basis. And to hire people and get somebody on board, get them up to speed, you know, and then after the projects are done, 2 years from now or so, the reporting is done, and then you have to let those employees go. We just believe that this is by far the best way of doing this. But we did not speak specifically about CLA. We just talked about third-party administrator in general.
So what about finance? We're going to take 3 or 4 months out of the general fund, and the rest we're going to budget next year for the fund?
I think that has to be discussed yet. It depends on what action that the committee takes here and how we would move forward. But we also agree that if the county board were to approve this next week, Tuesday, we would have CLA begin as soon as we possibly could. Even, you know, we talked about at the end of the month, we're talking about even before the end of the month, that they could get started on this.
Question, John. You mentioned if the county board approves, and the first thing that came to mind to me is, what is our plan if they do not approve this? Then what do we do? How do we move forward with this?
Well, as I've mentioned before, if you do nothing, if the board does nothing, the staff is going to have to do it. We have no option. But things will fall through the cracks. We're very limited. We have staffing shortage. The finance staff is awesome. Everyone that I've worked with here, they've been awesome. But you can only do so much. So things will fall through the cracks. And that's why we believe we should get going on it right away, and hiring a firm like CLA gives us that expertise up front, and we can move day one.
Is CLA's role going to be that, like of a project manager, if something starts to slip behind, they raise the alarm so that they either take people who may have time in this area, move them over there to help get this one up to where everybody's pretty parallel? Or?
I guess my thought on that is we'd have to have further conversations, but my thought is that you're still going to have a person at the county who's going to be the lead person and the point of contact to do
Exactly,
that.
but I want to know who's doing what, because if we have the county who's doing their regular job and taking this on, would it be better to have somebody else who's familiar with the whole process doing that alarm and talking to that individual and then making a decision? I'm just curious how that's going to function.
Yeah. I would see it
That can be
again.
decided later, but.
Yeah, I would see it again as if you have a point person in the county working with other departments. Certainly, you know, the upper dollars coming in, currently going to the treasurer's office. So we have to, you know, have discussions there. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I see it more as that person, that point person in the county would be handling both of that, most of that, and directing that, using CLA whenever we feel that it's beneficial for the county to do that.
So the CLA is going to be that point person's contact, and you're going to be their best friend because they need you to help them to understand the process because you're very familiar with it, and it would be foreign to us, we're learning. Okay, got it, thank you.
Would I be able to add something?
Go ahead, Patty.
I'm the county treasurer. Lift it. So I just want to add that the five and a half hours that Stephanie and I worked on the July reporting, which was the April through June activities, that was with one expense, finishing up the broadband study and setting up what was approved, and it had approved, went through contracts through Kim, so through the court counsel. So that was with no expenses coming in yet. So I see the portal as a premium for us, something that will bring in those expenditures, those expenses, the invoices, everything comes in. They're gonna, my expectations are, they're gonna look them over and say, oh, you didn't give us enough of the, you know, we don't have enough documentation for this. We don't have enough, you know, we need more information. Then that information will be forwarded to the finance department so that they can cut checks back to them. Because they're gonna have the expenditures coming in, right? They're gonna pay, and then it's gonna come to the county, it's gonna come to us through their portal, and then we're gonna have to pay it back with ARPA funds. Right? So that's, my expectations are that of them for our reporting purposes every quarter.
Can you talk to them already about this?
I've seen the portal.
That's what you ate for Brian?
Right, that's the portal. That we saw last month.
But that's the way you expect the portal to work, the way Patty's
Yes.
talking about that.
That's the way to capture the information all in one place.
Right.
That's what you need.
And that's my expectation. So we can go in there and we can glean the information that we need to report quarterly.
Yep.
And for questions and such that we have.
Well, having it all consolidated is
Right.
easier because you're looking at the sum of the whole of one thing. It's not the sum of the whole of many things. You can specify what it is you want to look at, what you're querying about, and make sure that you have all that data out there, or you have the information that you need. It's so much easier, so much easier.
Our reporting from April to our reporting in July was like a whole new world. Everything, if there was 3 drop-downs for something, for a project in April, there was 10 drop-downs in July. So there's only drop-downs to choose from. So Stephanie and I kind of just winged it on what it should be. You know, luckily, we believe we can still change them if they're not correct.
You
So
should be able to.
it was, you know, and they won't let you keep going if something isn't right. And you can't answer NA. You have, not available, none. You have to tell them what it is, like. Okay, so that's why it's so important to have this help for us.
Oh, I agree.
So
I'm sold on it.
I guess we all have different expectations of them, and I just wanted to let you know what my expectations are for them.
When
Thank
you
you.
look at the technology, you understand what it can do for you,
Mhm.
and how it allows you and your staff to accomplish greater things than you ever could with what you currently have, where you don't have to add people and you don't have to train those people.
We don't want to add people, we just want to do this
Exactly.
correctly and effectively and efficiently.
No, I understand.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Does the committee feel it has enough information to forward to the county board?
I would think that we can forward it to the county board. One exception is that administrator has to come up with a plan on how we're going to budget funds.
I believe it can be paid out of the ARPA funds. So it would become, Kim?
It's an eligible ARPA expense, so it would come out of the ARPA funds. And the finance committee did review the resolution this morning and signed off on the fiscal note, which reflects that. It's subject to your action today. So if you're okay with sending it to the board, the fiscal note will be signed off.
Is that okay, Rob?
Yep. I'll make the motion to move it on to the full funding board.
I'll second.
And we have a motion by Supervisor Belt, seconded by Supervisor Molly. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Karen, do you want to do your county board report?
Oh, sure, great. Thank you. In your packet was the spreadsheet of information that's coming, proposed items for August 16th agenda. You're going to be talking about some of these items here yet today. There's a claim and maybe an ordinance or two that you'll be discussing that are not on the spreadsheet. Also included is, you should all have got notice that there will be a meeting August 30th. And at first it was just going to be strategic planning. Now the 12 ARPA resolutions will be at that meeting on the 30th. That's also at 6 p.m. And a possible new county board appointment, District 24. I guess. We heard from Craig Thompson
Yeah, Craig is planning to be here for
on the 16th.
county board meeting on the 16th. Supervisor, that's the Department of Transportation Secretary.
And then also on the agenda under county clerk was an annexation from the town of Chester to the city of Houchin. This one's a little different. They have to create a new ward because Chester and Houchin differ in a Senate and Assembly districts. So they have to have a new ward for that.
You didn't catch that first time? I mean, we did their redistricting?
They just did the annexation. They annexed from the town of Chester 2 weeks ago. And we don't set up the congressional Senate and Assembly districts, so I would avoid that.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We could, because we have some folks here to, about that, we would bring up number 20, Supervisor Belt, and about the tax incremental finance district in the city of Horicon, and how that might affect our funds. And Supervisor Johnson, as chair of the ARPA committee, asked Horicon to clarify how that would affect your kids.
So, Rob, I know you attended one of the meetings, you had a question about the TID. You forwarded me the information, and I just want to get clarification on that, to make sure that that question is answered. And I want to make sure that the information that the ARPA committee had was in fact completely correct, and that we made the correct decision.
Good.
Could you just expound on what your issue was with?
Well, it looked like on one of the TIFs that they're going to be subsidizing one of the tax incentive districts with ARPA funds from the county, and it was going to make them self, they're basically using the county funds to make a positive balance in their TIF. Without the county funds, they would be have a negative balance, and then we as the county would be subsidizing their TIF.
How how would that be a negative impact on the county?
Well, I don't think that, I believe, my opinion, is 87,000 people in Dodge County shouldn't subsidize the city's TIF district when the city itself is the one that creates the TIF. The county doesn't have a lot of say in it. The county does have a yes or no vote on it. However, the whole creation of the TIF and the incentives that are given out on that TIF district is done by the city itself. Now, it should be for a couple different reasons, because the city, ultimately, if you don't set it up right, it all falls back on the city, and they'd have to pay out the difference. So this TIF, I believe, is closing out in just over 5 years. In the last 5 years, you can't, by law, you can't give out any incentives the last 5 years of the TIF. So there would be only 5 months left on the TIF for incentives.
But we would start, if the TIF closes out, then we would start getting our tax money, right?
We won't get the tax money until it closes out in 5.5 years, approximately. But they can only give out the incentives for this year is the last year they give out their incentive. So the question is this 300 and some thousand that we're going to subsidize Horcon's shortcomings under TIF? And we'll have a $90,000 positive balance at the end of the closing of the TIF because of the money that we are subsidizing. I don't think it's right for the whole county. I don't think it's right for other municipalities. I mean, whatever the incentive amounts they give out for their development, that's on the city itself. You know, every city does things differently, and how much they give out on the incentive.
Would the city of Horicon like to give us some update on?
I'm Mayor of Horicon, but I'm going to turn it over to Vanderwall Associate Scott Harrington to kind of rebut that.
Hi, thank you for the time. This is Scott Harrington, Van Wall and Associates Consultant to the City of Horicon. We addressed this committee, I believe, back in January, and then we met with the ARPA committee as directed, I think, back in March. And this was the handout that we had with the committee, ARPA committee in March. And nothing has changed on this from what we showed then, except a note that where we had previously indicated that we would use some cash on hand plus borrowing. After the city consulted with its financial advisor, which I am not, I'm their economic development advisor, that they should instead take the cash on hand and apply it to debt and borrow. So the funds that have been requested from the county's ARPA things are not to subsidize the TIF, they're to assist this housing project. That's completely what it's about. What we showed to the JRB, Joint Review Board, in the meeting last month, was that the city has maximized its borrowing capacity out of the TIF and applied almost all of that to this project. The city's also put in 80% of their own ARPA funds into this project. And so without that, we wouldn't, our TIF would probably end up running in a deficit. If we had to borrow the funds that have been recommended by the ARPA committee, the TIF alone cannot handle that. So that's always been the mix of sources that we have shown on this table was city ARPA funds, county ARPA funds, and TID funds. And that's still the same thing, and that proportion has not changed one bit from what we showed at that time. The only slight nuance is all on borrowing versus cash on hand versus borrowing, and that was at the direction of the financial advisor. But the total amount that the TIF is contributing is the same as what we had proposed back in then. And that's the same as what your committee has recommended. And I should point out too that with that, we're still not sure if or whether or how we will get the funds for phase 2. Because as was pointed out, our TIF spending period closes in 6 weeks. And so we have to commit the funds. And as of right now, we're still trying to figure out if we're not able to obtain the ARPA funds for phase 2 from the county, which your committee has not recommended, then whether we're going to be able to go forward with that part of it or not. But the $350 that's been recommended is definitely needed for phase 1, or there's going to be some kind of a gap, a pretty significant gap that the city would have to figure out some other way other than the TIF, because the TIF can't handle borrowing that additional $350 without going into that. So it wasn't about making the TIF whole, it's making the project whole. And all we were showing is the TIF is contributing pretty much everything it has towards its project, and it's still not enough.
Right, and that was my whole point. If you don't get the money from the county, you're gonna be running in a deficit situation, and at the end of the day, when the TIF closes, the taxpayers of Oregon are on the hook for that funds, right?
Right, so, but that's what we presented to this committee back in January. It's
Well, this
exactly,
committee was not here.
well, an executive committee. We met with an executive, whatever executive committee was in place at that time. And when we met with the ARPA committee, that's exactly what we presented too, is that there's a mix of funding that's here, and we need the additional funds because the TIF alone can't handle it. If we had more time on the TIF, we might be able to handle it, but because we're in the twilight, we can't. And we can't create another TIF because the value of John Deere in that TIF, and that was basically a requirement of them in order to do the data expansion that they did and create all the jobs that they did, was they be in the TIF. We're over the 12% limit, so we can't create another TIF pretty much until this TIF closes. So that would have been another option, but it's not on the table because
the requirements of the deal are, right, 12%. So what he's saying is that the government only lets you have TIF districts of a certain percentage of the total assessed value, which can't be over 12%. If it is, you can't create another TIF, that's what he said.
that's exactly right.
So,
So again, it's not about making the TIF whole, it's making the project whole. The TIF can't do it, and the city's already pledged all of its ARPA funds. So it's not about bailing out the TIF, it's about assisting the project, just the same as it was back in March.
but this TIF closes in 2027,
Correct.
so you only have until the end of this year to have any more incentives on this project at all, because you can't give out incentives the last 5 years of the TIF.
Right, actually, as of September 22nd, I
Right.
can't give out any more incentives. Right, so we gotta move this project right now, which is what, the city is intending to do. And having the county funds would really make a huge difference in how that is, structured.
So the funds, to make it clear from the ARPA committee point of view, and that's what you appeared in front of the committee that I chair, the ARPA committee. It is money going towards the infrastructure for the housing project in phase 1.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's what I wanted to know. I didn't know about the TID and TIF stuff. Our committee was not concerned that our conversation didn't take place around that. Rob, our conversation took place about the incentive to help housing.
Right, and I just caught this because I'm on the TIF stuff, so that's why I caught this, but, there's other, communities I know have applied for ARPA funds that I haven't met with yet on their yearly evaluations, which would be interesting to see where they're at as well, how they're going to use their funds, but I still feel the same way. I feel that we are, you can say we're not bailing you out, but without the funds, you're in a deficit situation.
Right, and that's what we've said from the beginning, that we don't have enough funds on hand or ability to borrow through the TIF in order to pay for this desperately needed housing project. We're getting apartments out of it, we're getting for sale duplexes, we're getting small homes for sale, large homes for sale. There's been 4 homes built in Oregon in the last 10 years, 4 single-family homes. So we're way past due. Our biggest employer is struggling to find employees. You've seen the letters of support from our school district, from John Deere, from some of our other major employers and community groups. And you had your own housing study done last year that made it very clear that without some kind of assistance that, you know, we're really behind the eight ball as far as the whole county goes in trying to support our employers with workforce housing. And that's exactly what this project does. By paying for the infrastructure, it keeps those price points at something that most people, or at least a number of people in Dodge County can afford.
But you only have a couple of weeks left to go for the incentive.
Right, well, if we commit the funds before September 22nd, construction can continue on beyond that. So that's the plan. So we've already put this project out to bid. We're all set up to award a bid right at the end of September, right before our spending period closes. So.
So you're saying that your project is hindering on the funds itself, and if we don't get the funds, then you're gonna stop the project?
Well, city council will have to kind of decide then where it wants to make that money up.
The ARPA funds that we already approved, a lot of that isn't just for one community or another. It was meant to improve things in the county. I mean, there's a couple of them that didn't necessarily benefit just, you know, the whole county, but it was maybe one area, but that was going to help the county long term. So the idea that this is just Horicon asking for 300,000, I look at it as one of the main needs of the county was housing. I mean, that's been identified for years of a problem here in not only Horicon, but the whole county. And it's something that would be desirable all the way around.
For what, for a few weeks?
For a few weeks.
Yeah, because this is what, the incentive's only good for a few more weeks and it expires. So we are subsidizing their tip. Because at the end of the day, they're gonna be in a deficit situation if you don't get the funds.
Well, you're committing in a few weeks, but the value of the TIF goes on.
Yes, until it closes.
How did the ARPA committee grade this out? They went through this year, right?
Yes, they did. I don't have the grade with me, but yeah, it scored on the higher end, and yes, it did. And my understanding, this is for 36 apartments and 6 homes, is that right? 36 apartments?
36 apartments.
6 houses.
It's 10 duplex units, so 5 structures, 10 duplex units. I think 7 or 8 small lots, smaller home, and 5 or 6 large lot, larger home. That's all part of phase 1. Phase 2 has additional units, but that's part of phase 1.
The total for phase 1 is 1.845 million. We're a pretty minor partner in this, our participation.
But
right, is that correct? What I'm saying?
right, yeah, the 350, you know, you can see the percentages. Well, I guess that's for phases 1 and 2.
Well,
Right.
And one could say that we've already helped out by even approving the TIF. That was the whole point of the TIF. Most counties don't put money into a community's TIF funds so that they can help them out. Most of them, the incentive is the TIF, because that is the tools that the city uses to generate more growth and more revenue. And then eventually it comes back and all fold to the county, because when it goes out, we'll get the extra income.
Well, again, it's not going to the TIF, it's going to the project infrastructure. The money will never come into the TIF fund. The money is going straight into the project.
So you're mentioning TIF all the time, and how is that different? Again, haven't been a mayor ever, or a city council. I need a little bit of help understanding the difference in where you're coming from, Rob, on the helping their TIF out versus helping a goal to expand housing in the city.
Well, so I have created a TIF. So when we created the TIF, you know, you figure out how much it's gonna cost for the development and how much the improvements are gonna be, right? And then you go ahead and borrow that money to have the completion of the project. That's how we did it. And once it's done, then the increment that we're gonna be getting or generating every year will go back into that fund until there's enough money to pay everything off.
Right.
They don't have enough money in there right now. They're banking on this money that we're gonna give them to self-fund that money for the fund.
This is TIF business, it's not housing business.
That's why they applied to the funds, would be my understanding. That's what the ARPA committee.
Right,
They
yeah.
consider that, and they're, you know, the county put out there for an opportunity. And one of our county's long-term goals is to improve housing. And I understand what you're saying about the other incentive of that, but I think, just so you know, Rob, the committee didn't really think of it that way. The committee thought of it more as, we want to invest in housing and be a partner in the housing. That is how we viewed it. I just want to, we approved it. We didn't really discuss
Well,
the tip
I'm not trying to put blame on anybody here, Andrew, it's just, you know, let's be honest, there's probably, in the whole county, there's probably 5% of the people that actually know how TIF works and how they function, and, you know, so I'm not saying there's anybody on the board that's an expert at this at all.
So does this have to be considered a TIF thing, a district?
Well, that's where
This what this
that's where
is.
calculations are, they're putting the 300 and some thousand into the TIF, so it's self-sufficient.
I think they're putting it into the project.
Yeah.
But the project is the TIF.
They're supplementing the TIF. The TIF was not enough to complete the whole project. So this is a housing grant, not a TIF grant. That's the way I look at it.
And that's absolutely correct. There are three sources of funding. One is city ARPA funds, so 300,000 out of the 380 that they were granted is going into this project. Money that the TIF doesn't have to borrow, the city doesn't have to borrow, it's cashed into paying for the infrastructure. Your funds would be the same way. It's cash into paying for the infrastructure, and then the TIF will borrow the balance and pay for the balance. That's because you're right, the TIF can't afford it on its own, which is exactly why we ask for assistance from the county, because we don't have any more city funds, we don't have any more TIF funds, and we still have this gap. And that's where we were in March, that's where we are today. So TIF is one of the funding mechanisms, but and the project is in a TIF, but your funds aren't going into a TIF. Your funds are going into water and sewer and roads and stormwater, just as the city's ARPA funds are going into all that. And then the TIF is providing the lion's share, actually, but the balance of the funds for this initial, what do we got here, $1,845,000 is what this phase one infrastructure costs. So it's a funding source, but it's not a TIF project. It's a housing project, and your funds are going directly into the infrastructure for the housing.
The number you have down here is 325. In our resolution, when I asked you at our meeting, when you came to us in March, you requested 350 for that phase. The original request is 1.2 million, and then we asked you how much you needed to get phase one. You told us 350. On here it says 325. What is the number?
Well, 350 is what the committee recommended. I just wanted to be consistent with the numbers. So when we came forward in March, it was 325 and 975. I'm not quite sure where the 350 came from, but we'll gladly take the other 25 in the cash flow that we shared with the joint review board. We assumed that we're getting 350 to show how much more debt that the TIF could take on. So, but I just wanted to be clear that 325 for phase one was our original ask. 975 was for phase two.
Got it.
But we could certainly use, honestly, 350.
That was my mistake then.
Yeah.
I must have misunderstood it.
Okay, and that might have been mine too. I apologize for that.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask our legal counsel a quick question? I just want to make sure. Kim, with the changing of the funding sources, will that affect, in your legal opinion, the resolution that the ARPA committee approved?
No.
Okay, so it would be satisfactory as we have it written and recommended to the
It would
board?
be, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no further questions.
Dave, I heard you talking about different thing than what I heard Rob talk. You know, I'm understanding a little bit more on TIFs, okay? But you were talking about it being a housing project.
It's a housing, in my opinion, it's a housing grant.
And, yeah, housing grant, and that's the way I was reading it when I looked at this before a meeting here, that it was going towards housing and not some kind of a TIF project.
Well, it is.
Now, technical things besides or whatever else, I
You
just,
just said it was going for streets and roads and sewer. Now he's saying it's going for.
housing, well, again, it's all,
When you built the
One and
TIF
the same,
15 years
isn't it?
ago, when you built the TIF 15 years ago, you were putting in the infrastructure at that time, right?
No,
You didn't.
no, we didn't.
You just created a
No,
TIF.
the build it and you come is really a dangerous approach.
Right.
So, no, we didn't do that. we've been very fiscally responsible in how we use TIF dollars to make sure that whatever indebtedness we might incur, that we're able to pay it back. And that's where I'm saying, in this case, if we use TIF to incur the entire debt, we know we wouldn't be able to pay it back. That isn't really a good way to operate anything. So, yeah, it's a housing project. The infrastructure supports the housing. The builder is 100% responsible for the costs of the structure, and the builder also bought the land. But by putting in the roads and the sewer and the water and all of that, we can keep these price points hopefully below 300, and some of them, maybe the duplex is closer to 250, which are, you know, according to your own housing study, is kind of that missing middle that this county desperately needs. And so we do, in our agreement with the developer, have a cap on how much profit he can make off of his own costs, so that he can't charge the buyers for the costs that we're putting in. So it is a housing project. The infrastructure facilitates that. Without it, this builder would not build, because he would have to sell houses for $350 to $400, and there aren't enough buyers, and that is out of the market range of what your housing study said is desperately needed.
And again, being it was ARPA funds, and hearing what Chairman said and Mr. Supervisor Johnson, I'm looking at it as this is a way to grow the county. This is a way to help the county, and in housing, it's one of our priorities. As long as it's ARPA money and it's going towards a goal that I can see in the long run, I'm sort of thinking I'm gonna wanna favor something like that.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I asked you to bring it here, I just wanted to vent it here when Clerk could respond, because I did not know those technicalities you brought up to my attention, and so I thought it would be best that it be aired out here, and if there was a problem, as the ARPA chairman, and the resolution wasn't correct, I would like to know that, you know, because then we couldn't go forward with it. But it appears that it's legally in order. Thank you for coming, Scott, and presenting your side, and Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yeah, there's nothing.
No decision, there's no decision.
For us to act on, you know, it's more informational for the rest of us, you know.
Well, it's helpful for me. I'm not a city council person, and that's really sort of educational here for me.
On behalf of the city, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
And thank you for moving the agenda item up. Very much appreciated.
John, and you want to do your report?
The first agenda item, Kim, did you want to the claim?
Sure. We received a claim, my understanding that it came from the highway for certain damage, and then and maybe it hasn't been this particular committee's practice, but in the past, the executive committee wants to hear a report from me about the claim, and then what happens is I sign off, and if we get a notice from WMIC, which we did in this case, to disallow the claim, there is a form that was prepared for the executive committee previously, and I sign off, and the executive committee signs off, and then it goes on the county board agenda as a report to accept the disallowance request that was given by WMIC. So in your packet, you should have had the actual disallowance and then the form. Again, this claim came out of highway, and I'm sorry that I did not bring the details of the claim, but it was a highway claim, and my recollection is a tire, a pothole, something of that nature. And WMIC said that we're not liable for it, so.
So you're looking for a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adopt the disallowance, and then I will send this around for signature.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. And the update on the air controllers.
Thank you. At the last meeting, Supervisor Belk asked if we would take a look at this. It's been quite some time since the claim. On August 2nd, I spoke to Mark from M3, and they said that the prior day, so on August 1st, they had a conversation with the insurance company. And he said the good news is that to this point in the investigation, the insurance company has not been able to find an exact cause. And he said that's a good thing, because if they found the cause, then it could be somebody else's issue, and that the insurance company, our insurance company, the county's insurance company, would not have to pay. So he thought the fact that they couldn't find a smoking gun, number one, and number two, that there has been a delay in paying the claim works to our advantage, because any insurance company, if there's an outstanding claim too long, the respective insurance commissioner from the state, this happens to be from the state of California, will be taking a look at why hasn't that claim been resolved, either paid or put to bed. So he said he couldn't really tell us anything more than that right now, except that the investigation is still going on. And he also asked if we could take a look as a county to see if Jim Milkey, since he retired, would have received something called the Reservation of Rights letter. And I've gone through all of Jim's documents and any documents that I had, emails, since I came in, and we have not received, the county has not received, to the best of our knowledge, a Reservation of Rights letter. So the longer this goes on, the more likelihood that the insurance company will be paying the claim.
Do we have any time limits on our part that we have to?
If we would have received the Reservation of Rights letter, then I think there's some time frames that kick in, but as of now, no. And they just said that we should stay in contact with them, so I will make sure that Cameron has Mark's contact information at M3, and that we continue to look into this.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions on that?
Any other questions? All right, the finance director recruitment is next.
Right. So we continue, when I say we, it's PAA and others we continue to see if we hear or see about individuals out there that might be interested in coming to Dodge County. So far, we have not been successful in that regard. I had a conversation as recently as yesterday with a good friend of mine from Baker Tilly, which also is the county's auditor. And they just said that it is extremely difficult in the public sector, cities and villages, but even more difficult for counties because there's only 72 counties. What cities and villages are seeing is more people apply for the positions that already have city and village background. We're not seeing that so much in county government. And so the trend, what we're seeing, I think unfortunately, is that they are hiring people that have the qualifications, but not necessarily the experience in local government. That's what a lot of the counties, at least in the state of Wisconsin, are doing. So what we've talked about internally, and certainly Chairperson Froling has been involved in these conversations, is that we can't wait with the finance administrator. We can't let the budget wait because we don't have a finance director. We believe that with myself and Cameron coming on, with the assistance of the county board chair and the staff that we currently have in place, our focus needs to be now on getting a draft budget, a proposed budget to the county board so that we can move forward. We will continue to explore and see if we can find individuals that would be interested in coming as the finance director for Dodge County. And where I'm leaning personally as a recommendation is that let's let Cameron get settled in here. And once he's here, I think it might be a wise investment on the county's part to do another recruitment. It's been several months. It's been nearly a half a year since those ads went out. And things change in people's lives and job situations. And I think the other thing that with, if the recession would get really bad, there's people that are looking for more stability in employment. And that is one thing that the public sector has an advantage on. Where right now, with compensation, we're not necessarily, we can't compete or we can't move as quickly as the private sector can. So that's part of the struggle there. So we will continue, unless we hear something otherwise, we will continue pursuing. If there's individuals that we think are interested And like I said, I'd like to have a further conversation with the chair about at some point here in the near future, the county consider re-advertising for the position, which would be, the cost to the county would be just the cost of the ads. PAA would continue with the recruitment process at no additional cost, because that's part of the agreement that PAA has in place with you. If there's any questions on that, on the recruitment, please?
Questions from the committee? I think we've been making calls, but at this point, we haven't shown the right tree.
Correct. And we are, like I said, we're calling retired finance directors, we're calling auditors, we're calling anyone that might have an individual that, or individuals that might be well suited for the position. But as I mentioned to the finance staff this morning, the worst thing that we could do is bring someone on that didn't have the appropriate qualifications. We'd rather work with the staff that we have now and work through the budget and do what we need to do, rather than bring someone on that doesn't, that isn't the best fit for the county.
And good finance.
With that, next, Mr. Chair, on the health insurance, we will have the joint meeting tomorrow. And we'll get further updates on healthcare. Last I heard, and probably it's going to end up being that we will only have one person that is, not one person, one firm that's interested or agency in healthcare, and that's Dean Health, where we're currently at. No other provider at this point has stepped forward to give us a quote. And as I mentioned this morning at the Finance Committee, that HR ran the numbers. We knew percentages, what the county would have to pay if we were to go back into the state health plan. And we have to buy in. There's a surcharge. If you leave the program to get back in, there's a surcharge, and it's based on the percentage of your claims over the last 2 years. And as everyone knows, our claims have been on the high side. So the cost for the county to go back into the state plan is $4.3 million in year one, 4.6 million, excuse me, in year one, and 2.3 million in year two. So $6.9 million, and I guess my personal opinion is that's not the best way to spend money right now. Maybe at a different point and claims are down, but I don't really consider that a viable option for the county moving forward to 2023. Next, on the 6-month review, unless there's any questions, the 6 months review for county board, the administrator, and let's see, emergency management is in there as well. If you have questions, we can respond to that. On the county administrator's portion of the budget, we're trending pretty good after 6 months, but we have to remember that now we'll have Cameron coming back in, so his salary will be there. Plus then there's the contract with PAA that we're just starting to pay those bills now. So like for right now, for 6 months, we're doing okay, but it certainly appears that we will be over budget in that department for at the end of the year. So much. Well, I think that depends on another issue that's before you on the agenda later today, and there's been some talk about an extension of a contract with PAA on the interim services through a transition period.
If the contract ended at the end of August, I think we'd be around 20,000 at year end. Just ballpark figure. And that's just trying to project.
Right. Yes.
Other questions on any of the other budgets? They were included in your packet.
Okay,
Thank you.
Tim, contract review, they were sent out. Any questions on the contract review?
Yeah, got a question. On the international manpower contract, the question I have is, since this thing goes through the county board, how is this legal that we approve this contract with this firm?
It's all coming out, it's like any other employment recruiting. So for instance, we
is gonna cost like way over $25,000.
For this one, it's depending on how many.
For 16, I thought they were gonna hire.
They are looking
2,500 a piece.
they're looking at 16 at first, and they are then asking for another order of 16 additional. So I didn't bring the contract with me, but I'm happy to talk to you about it offline. There's a placement fee of $250. There is a labor certification fee, and there's also a fee if you expedite the certification. So there's various fees based on number of individuals that are sponsored. And it's my understanding that all of the funds available to support these various fees will be funded by Clearview for sure. But secondly, will also be funded via funds that were obtained from the federal and state government for Clearview, to support Clearview.
I'm just gonna go on record, I think this is totally ridiculous that we're hiring foreign workers to come over here and work for our county, and we're not even gonna bring this to the full county board for any kind of consideration.
I can tell you that one of the requirements under the Department of Labor certification is that the jobs have to be posted and advertised, and if there is domestic, so local individuals that apply, we cannot hire the foreign workers. We have to hire the domestic workers. That's a requirement of the federal regulations. That's part of that certification process. So any other questions about contracts that are on the short list? The short list this time. There's a number of contracts that are awaiting review and awaiting signature, but I don't put them on until they're done. And then the next thing is included in the budget, or included in the packet was the budget report.
We have the opioid.
Oh, is that next?
securitization.
Okay, sorry. So, one of the last committee meetings, I think it was the July 11th, there was discussion about securitization of the opioid settlement funds. And the committee decided not to definitely commit, but expressed interest in continuing to pursue securitization. We had a requirement from the parties that are considering the securitization to report to them by the 22nd of July of our interest. And so I reported that interest, and they are continuing to run the numbers and to put together a securitization packet. I don't know if the chair wants to add anything more to that, but I will say that there is an August 22nd summit regarding opioid settlement that is going to be attended by somebody from the county, but it really isn't about securitization of the funds. It's more about use of the funds. The use of the ARPA settlement dollars is spelled out in the agreement that we signed, and there's specific uses for abatement of the opioid epidemic. So,
Right. I've been sat in on securitization discussions a couple of times. I guess for lack of a better term, I challenged their numbers. The group says that for 15% you're securitizing the funds, taking the risk away. The way I looked at it, for 15% of the total, you're securitizing 54 to 56% of the funds, because the other you're getting, and then there's a residual on the end. So the actual cost of the county is around, in my opinion, 27%. And I challenged them, and they are reworking their numbers, because after I did that, one of the other counties agreed with me. So now they're reworking their numbers to be a little more upfront on what the real cost is. The bottom line is they were taking a percentage of the whole amount. First 2 years, you're going to get anyway. And then there's a residual on the end that was not totally securitized. So, and it comes down to what you think the value of money is now I did it based on, tried to be conservative with it, that the money accrue at 2%. If we spent the money over the next 10 years, that the part that we didn't spend would be gaining 2% a year on there. And I think we would do better than that, but, so, my numbers and theirs were a little different, so.
And I would say that before the county decides to be all in on securitization and actually sign the agreements and pass a resolution that would authorize it, you're gonna want more detailed numbers and present value of the funds to be securitized.
I believe on the 12th, this Friday, there's supposed to be another meeting where they will have updated numbers.
So the July 22nd deadline for expressing interest, after that deadline occurred, I did learn that 68 municipalities, and that's a combination of counties and cities, because you'll probably remember at the very last minute, 11th hour, about 15 to 17 municipalities jumped in on the settlement. They were given a drop dead date and they got in right under the wire. So 68 counties and municipalities have expressed interest. So I do think if securitization goes forward, and even if 3/4 of those municipalities stay with securitization, it's probably worth it to the parties that are actually structuring the securitization to proceed. So the county at this point has just expressed interest, and I think you're gonna want a whole lot more detail before you decide to.
There were 87 folks that could have expressed interest, 68 did. The counties and municipalities that have small amounts that they're getting, it's more work than it's worth to change your 100,000 that you're gonna get over 18 years. Get 70,000 now and be done. So they probably will not, they'll just get the securitization, take their money and go. But I think those of us who have a larger number coming, it's a much more in-depth calculation.
And at some point, you'll remember that there will need to be a decision by the board about how the funds will be allocated. Again, we have to use the funds consistent with the settlement agreement, and there's all different ways to achieve abatement of the opioid. So you have some options, but you'll have to decide how you want to proceed.
And that's the big seminar on the 22nd, is to help give some clarity to the options of how you can spend the money. Which is also Cameron's first day on the job, so not like you're gonna be Cameron.
So that's all I have on that one. And then any questions on the status of my budget? I'll tell you that I'm over in the reporting, that budgeted amount is a mere $200, but I did cover the cost of recording and everything necessary for the roll farm closing, and that is all closed. So the county's now the proud owner of the farm, the buildings. That's all I got.
All right. Emergency management, the budget review, I think it was in, and there's questions. You want to just give a 2-minute update of what we're doing on 10th?
I guess I don't know that it would be appropriate unless it's on the agenda somewhere.
Okay.
Look at the paper, there's an article.
Yeah.
Well, 19C, how about 19C if you want to move that up?
Yep.
Yeah, 19C is in my report, is that on the 10th, we're having a meeting to discuss the future of fire and EMS in the county. And Amy is a key part of that, so.
So we met last week, John and Dave, and myself and Joe, Dave Dukenberger, to come up with an agenda. I have about a 10-slide PowerPoint we put together with some information on, some of the attendees might be newly elected officials from municipalities. We invited fire, EMS, we invited board members. Some of they might be newly elected since the study that we did in 2020. So some of it is going to be information, background information on how the statutes read. Some of it will be information on how Dodge County does things now and how our EMS and first responder and paramedic services work now. We have some numbers on call volume, and then it's going to be somewhat just a layout of what the requirements are for each position and what legal crews are. And then the end result is basically discussion among the attendees. You know, where are we since 2020? Is it something that should be pursued, looked into, or is it something not? So it'll depend on who attends and what the interest is.
So basically, you're asking those that attend to look at the future. I mean, what are you dealing with today? What do you see coming down the road, kind of thing? And where do we need to be then in your vision versus where we are today and all those?
So it'll look at the 2020 study. Things have not changed. If anything, the calls have increased. The numbers, you know, things have not gotten better. We have not gotten more volunteers. The hours of training are increasing. So it'll be talking about in the next few years, do these municipalities or do these service providers have a plan? What is their plan? Because, you know, some of the cities have full-time staffing, but nobody else does. And so what is the plan? And did we want to discuss it, or pursue it? Or do these municipalities and providers think that they have it covered?
I ran across it last night, and I put it on my calendar. I thought it sounded interesting. I'd like to hear what they have to say as far as the future, because they're in the best position to know. I mean,
I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't.
Oh,
I
no,
don't know what the
nobody
picture
does,
of the
but
future looks
yeah.
like, but, yeah, it'll be to provide the information we have and see what they have to say.
give you something to work with. Yeah.
Your first assessment is really, I think, where we're at, you know, and all we're trying to do is create discussion, get people talking, and
So
Well, I guess, right, get them talking, but are we on board? I mean, do we all more or less agree with the same things, or do we have a big group over here that's thinking one thing, and somebody over here, and we need to talk?
there's the last slide has bullet points of how we currently do things and what our strengths behind that and what needs improvements. And then we just intend to have an open discussion and go from there and see what the flavor is. Is there an interest? Is there no interest? Do we need to?
Do you have any volunteers?
Do we need to look at a work group? Do we need to look at, and there's also a slide on how other counties are doing it. Ones that we know of that have county-wide EMS, ones that we know of that are discussing it, and ones that's going there too.
They'd be a good source also. If you had a small committee or a group that wanted to go and visit.
I will tell you, every county does it different. Everyone that I've talked to has a different way to do it.
But still, it would be good information just to see how they're functioning and how long they've been at it and what they've learned so far, what works, what doesn't work.
I would say the majority of the counties are in the position we are.
Oh, I would
Know they gotta
agree.
talk about it, they're just not sure.
Yeah, I would agree.
Or some of them, a couple I've recently talked to in the last 2 weeks are just into a new way of doing business, let's call it, where they're levying taxes and doing it.
Your way of doing business.
Well, I mean, honestly, it is a new way of looking at things. We have to, it's a paradigm shift. We've done it for years with volunteers and somewhat on the backs of volunteers. That is not necessarily providing the services or working anymore, so we have to look at and shift our way of thinking on how we're gonna do it in the future.
No, I agree. I mean, I've seen it the last, how many years now, every year, things are changing and progressing. And you gotta keep up with it, because it's always just gonna pass you by.
And the compound.
Is there an issue with age groups? I mean, the ages within that, okay.
I can tell you that I am on the lower end of the volunteer range, and I am ready to retire after 20-plus years.
Okay.
So, I mean,
The idea is to get the 80-year-old guys out.
that is not the idea. Nobody's getting pushed out. For years, there's been a lot of people that have put in a lot of years, but.
Yeah, just kidding on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just curious, because this seems to be something within our county that's.
It's not within our county. It's within our state, it's within our nation.
Well,
This
and I
is
agree,
nation.
but I'm looking at Dodge County, and I know Dodge County's been
I
having.
would encourage every one of you to hear whether you're a county board supervisor or not, to come, because you were starting the discussion
Yep.
right here.
You're already
And that's
hearing
exactly
things
what
that-
we want to do on Wednesday night.
Hope to see you all there on Wednesday.
Thank you.
BJ. That doesn't look good.
So good news. Marquette County has decided to go with, or Greenland County has contracted with Marquette County for their medical examiner services in the future. As you know, they have asked us to help out, but they've gone in another direction, which is good for Greenland County, good for Dodge County. I don't think we would have been able to really do that efficiently. We're having some staffing problems right now, so. Works out well for everyone. So, good news. This should be the last time I have to report on it.
All right, PG.
All right, thank you.
13, Andrew, you want to?
As far as update on ARPA, we have not met since the month before last, and the current committee, as everyone knows, in the pipeline, there are 12 resolutions for consideration, and that'll be at the August 30th meeting. I believe we changed it to the August 30th meeting. Right now, we have total funds allocated, including the housing and of $350,000 and the $74,000 study for broadband. There's approximately $5.4 million. I think people would probably want to know where we're at. That's where we're at right today. If we add these other resolutions, the total resolutions going to the board are 2.797 million. So if we do pass those, or most of those, we're looking at a little over 8 million. And the goal of the committee was to try to allocate half of the money. So we'll be short of that goal, but we get pretty close. So I think that's pretty good. So I know we have some other things. You want me to go to the next? Okay. Establish future direction and makeup. Last month we talked a little bit about some of the things, at least I gave my recommendations. Kim has created a draft resolution for the county board. Today, we are just going to introduce it to you, and I think we're going to discuss it further next meeting. Is that right? Is that our plan?
So I did not, I did draft a resolution. I don't believe that I sent it out to all committee members, because really there needs to be a more verbose discussion, if you will, if that's the right word, about the future of the ARPA committee and what you want to do. So I did put together some language, but within the draft resolution, there's a couple of points that I think the committee will want to talk about and consider. And I don't know if the chair of the committee wants to take it over from here. I certainly can make copies of this and send it out to you for you to start thinking about things. I don't think there's any rush in necessarily dealing with the future of the ARPA committee. I think the county has its hands full right now with the number of projects we've got going.
I guess I would like to have you send that to the executive committee so we can discuss it, see it before we discuss it, but I think we need to get direction from the county board on the direction of the committee, whether, I think that, whether we limit it to county projects only or those type of things. I think that direction should come from the county board, and then that will affect how the ARPA committee would function going forward. Personally, I'd like to see the committee dissolved as such, and then we open it up to all board members to be on the committee going forward, because we'll have, I think, 9 new board members after this month, and those folks should all have an opportunity to be on that committee.
Mr. Chairman, if I could say something, we will though, and I don't know if it's a new committee, so I don't know if I would be chairman, I'd run for it, but all the work that we did could still be applied, and we could build on that work. So I think the committee, the existing committee has done a lot of work on a lot of different things, and all of those things will, in my opinion, can and should be used with our county asset, and I think that we can use those and we can improve those, and with the inclusion of new members, I think it could be even better. So I do, it's not like we're eliminating the old committee, but we're now eliminating all of their work. All of their work can be built upon and used in the next committee.
Okay. Number 14, county board rules. We have a review of number 9. We directed Kim last month to come with the draft for our review here.
Does anyone need a copy?
Yeah, all day long.
Okay.
I printed out the two. These are the two that were in that.
All 3 copies. I think I have it.
I don't see it right here. Do you have it?
So this was just a revision. The first one I'll talk about is a revision to Rule 9, just based on a little bit of the discussion, or actually the discussion, that occurred at the last meeting. It sounded to me like you wanted the rule to say that if you didn't want to prohibit an individual supervisor from bringing a resolution, right? You didn't want to stop that, but you wanted to get the individual supervisor to submit that resolution to the chair, so the chair could direct it to a committee. Refer it to the committee can act on it or not, the committee might not like it, and then the individual supervisor could go forward. If the committee says, yep, I like the subject matter of the resolution, the committee could sign off on it. So what I've done here is I've modified Rule 9, and I said that, I just took out some language first, and then I said, all memorials, resolutions, and ordinances that are to be considered and acted upon by the board, and I'm going to paraphrase, but it says that shall be sponsored and signed by a committee first, or a member of the Dodge County Board of Supervisors. But then in order for the member to sponsor a resolution and send it forth, the member must first present the resolution or ordinance to the chair for referral to the appropriate committee of the county board. If the resolution or ordinance is not sponsored by that appropriate committee upon referral, then the resolution may be sponsored and signed by the individual member. That's how that action item gets to the board. So I think every resolution or ordinance really does need to go through a committee, the appropriate committee, and it's up to the committee to decide whether or not it wants to sponsor it. Doesn't bar an individual supervisor from getting an action item going.
I always like to know if a committee has approved it or not, or, has a majority saying, yes, this is something that we're going to take a further look at. But, yeah, I like this.
was not on the finance committee agenda for a fiscal note, and ordinances and resolutions all like fiscal notes. So it's brought to you today for, just in draft form. You don't have to act on it or move it forward, and it wouldn't go to the board in August anyway. So you can think on it, and if you are satisfied with the language, I can bring a blue jacket version back to your next agenda, get a fiscal note on it, and then move it forward. If you, certainly tell me if you want language changes. Or if you want to think about it and then give me feedback. That's fine too.
Is there a consensus to have Corporation Counsel come back with final version based on this?
I'm in favor of this.
Yeah.
Time to think about it, it's fine.
So the other resolution, the ordinance amendment is that Rule 27, which is what you've already talked about. Supervisor Durr brought it forward. And in this version, what she wanted removed, which I have done, is remove the not with regard to closed session. So now the rule says that if a committee is meeting in closed session, a supervisor can be a part of that closed session. Took the word not out. But again, this resolution did not have a fiscal, this ordinance amendment didn't have a fiscal note. It was not on the agenda for this morning's finance committee. And I will just tell this committee, it's a little bit of a struggle when we have committee meetings kind of out of order, because the finance committee took some action subject to the executive committee, and just on a going forward basis, maybe you could flip. But anyway, so long story short is, this probably will not get to the county board until September unless the finance committee meets prior to the August 16th meeting. I don't know if there's a rush to it. They do meet tomorrow, but it's probably too late.
That's something else, right,
So this one is a simple one. The fix was made. I think it's ready in good final form to go forward once we get the fiscal note taken care of. So I will follow your direction if you want me to ask the finance committee to have a quick meeting before the August 16th board meeting. Or if you find that there's no rush on it, this could go as a matter of course to September.
I think it could go as a matter of course till September. If not. The only question is if everybody's comfortable with closed session being on a Zoom type meeting.
Committees meet in closed session. I would recommend that there be some protocols put in place for the chair of the committee to ensure that the supervisor that is participating remotely needs to make sure that the room is clear, they're not sitting in an airport in closed session. Those kinds of procedures need to occur. And I think that would be up to the chair of the committee to make sure. And I think, an individual supervisor who is going to appear remotely in a closed session, he or she may just want to think about whether or not it's, if it's something that you can't privately handle, going off to a separate room, maybe you just don't want to participate.
Is there a risk in your opinion for the county for what exactly they're talking about?
Not according to Robert's rules, there's no.
No, but I think there's a risk in terms of, depends on the subject matter of the closed session, and I'll just give an example. If you're in a closed session and you're talking about the county wanting to acquire property, you do want to go ahead and expand the parks. And the Land Resources and Parks Committee gets together in closed session and says, hey, we're just gonna put some real specific ranges on what you can offer per acre. And, your supervisor, town supervisor sitting in an airport or sitting at the coffee shop next to the farmer who's gonna put his land abuts the property. And somehow hears that, the county's not gonna go more than 5,000 an acre. Or the county's gonna go between 5 and 25,000 an acre.
He just hears that and goes, I'm asking for 25, because that's the upper limit. So those are, you know, the risks are specific to the circumstance. So let it go to
Then it
September?
goes till next month, I think. Number 15 is the County Board Strategic Plan, develop the agenda. John, you want to talk about that a little, or?
Just very briefly, we thought, we have to remember that the plan that is out there right now is a draft plan for the county board. And as was mentioned earlier, there's a number of new supervisors on the county board that haven't weighed into the plan. So what our thought process was is that the facilitator would come back in, do an explanation of how we got to where we are today, and then talk about next steps. That's what we're looking for on the 30th. And then we would like to move forward and put it on the agenda for the September, August board meeting to have the board approve the county board strategic plan. And then, you know, we can also talk about implementation, next steps, and who would be responsible for certain actions of the strategic plan. The plan's not going to do you a lot of good if you don't have people assigned to do the implementation. If we open any questions.
Yeah, I think it's really it's an update for the new supervisors, but what we really need to get done is to plan how we're going to implement and keep moving.
Brett Remington will be here in person. He has offered to come, as he did in the past, at no charge. He's very invested in the county's plan and wants to see it move forward and be successful. So he will be here in person. I am scheduled to have a conference call with him, and I'd actually like to invite the chair or anyone that wants to sit in with me, but just not enough people to form a committee, or quorum. So I'm scheduled to meet with him the week of the 22nd, because he does want to know, what does the county board want to hear? What should I be doing? And I think, as John said, it's definitely an overview. And I'm hoping that new and existing supervisors, or supervisors that participated in the strategic planning process, will continue to give input. A plan should not be something that, as I've said, harped on a couple times, to put on the shelf. It's got to be something that all supervisors are invested in and want to see move forward and hit the important topics and priorities for the county. So I can let the chair know when that meeting is or that conference call is, and if you have any ideas or thoughts in the meantime about the plan, let me know, or about what you want Brett to do.
Thanks, Joe. Number 16, discuss a resolution from Supervisor Houchin regarding pausing the ARPA spending.
Thank you. The reason I brought this resolution to start with is we didn't know how much the third county administrator the costs really were. And I liken it to, if I was going to buy a condo, I have to know what the HOA fees are before I buy it. Or if I buy a car, I have to know what all the fees are before I completely buy it. I did put it in to say, no, don't spend the ARPA money, but I want to know what our true cost was. Now we have a true cost. If the ARPA, since you already had the third party here, and you're going to put it on the county board meeting, if that passed, this resolution doesn't need to go forward. If it doesn't pass, I would like it to go forward, that we don't put any more ARPA funds out there until we know the true cost. And that was my purpose.
Any thoughts? Do you want to recommend leave it, put it on the county board agenda, and then it can be withdrawn if the first resolution passes? Personally, I'm in agreement with that.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Who is the second?
Whoever wants the second.
Everybody understands the motion is to forward it to the county board, and it would be withdrawn if the first resolution passes. All in favor, signify by aye. Opposed? That is carried. Number 17 was a resolution regarding transfer of the general fund for a Dodge County employee appreciation event. It's coming from, at this point, 2 committees, I believe, for us to, whether we want to sign on or what we would like to do.
Would this be finance?
Finance and HR have both passed it at this point, I believe. I got the blue jacket copy here. I believe they both have signed on. Yes.
How much money was it?
4,000. I have a personal opinion on this one. I think it would be better for us to include it in the next budget and with a little more planning into putting something together. And
Well, what's the backstory on this? How does this all come to the tuition?
I wasn't in HR when they did it to start with. Anybody want to talk about that, or?
I was asked by a supervisor to prepare a resolution for an employee broad cry. And the Supervisor Grishay, asked me to prepare that resolution and bring it to HR committee. It was just coined as an employee appreciation event. It's my understanding that he's gone out and kind of priced out what it would cost to have all county employees on all shifts have a lunch, and if they're not here at their regular lunchtime, a box lunch. And I think it was in the range of like $3,800. So that's the resolution, and that's what I prepared and gave it to him at the July 26th HR committee, and he took it from there.
What's the dollar amount per person?
You'd have to ask him, I don't know.
I was at a meeting where they said $6 a person, I think.
That sounds about right.
Because Suzanne had called 2 different places, because she called Watertown, the Guns, and she called the one in Beaver Dam. The Irvings, I think. And they both were about the same. And she said there was like a broad, some chips, you know, and a bar or something.
What's the purpose of this? Just saying, hey, you know, thanks for work for a county, here's a bribe?
You're asking the wrong person.
Is there a committee, an ad hoc committee or something that is, okay.
And it's going to go to the county board whether we sign on or not, because HR and finance have already signed on. I believe that's the way it would go. And
I have no problem with the idea, I don't think it's a lot of money. However, I'm a little confused on how this is going to function. Like Rob said, here's the box, here's, you know, thanks for working here. There has to be a little more organization to that than just ordering box lunches and saying, everybody come on down. And is that going to fall on employees or a combination of employees and county board supervisors? It would be nice kind of coming from the county board supervisors. I think that would be ideal, but that's why I want to know, is there a committee?
I think the HR or finance, that's probably where it came from, that's probably.
Oh, I know who it came from, right, she said, but it's
I
just.
think you got your committee.
Oh, thanks.
I think we don't.
I'm used to doing broad fries.
be careful what
I think appreciation, showing appreciation to employees is always a good thing.
I agree.
And I fully support the idea that Chairperson Froling has, that I would rather see it built into a budget. And the nice thing about doing that is it's not just a once and done. You would build it in the budget and it's for future years. So I think especially in these times, employers showing appreciation to their employees is an important thing. And that it should be a sincere effort.
When we did our ERP project, one thing that we made sure we did was the appreciation for the employees. And one thing I always wanted to do was, we used to do at American Family is we would have, big things of vanilla ice cream, strawberry ice cream, chocolate, whatever. And then all the toppings, you would down and make whatever you want. Everybody loved it. They couldn't wait to get down there and make their own sundaes or whatever they wanted. But it wasn't a lot of money, but everybody was very happy. They liked it. They appreciated it.
And I'm not against it, but I think logistically, I think we should do it. And Clerk could have more effect.
I would agree.
I just think it's ironic, we want to spend $4,000 on broth, but then has to go through a full county board, but if we're gonna hire 400 workers, we don't have to have that go to the full county board.
But what's the committee thinking? You want him to sign on, or just have the discussion at the board?
I'd like more information, what does Rich have in mind for this, and what's his vision?
It's already gonna go to the board. So.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Oh,
because
well,
the
that'd
other
be
two
interesting
committees have signed
conversation.
up, so it's a matter of.
Well, let it go to the board.
Let us see what happens at the board. We'll go with the flow. And it's still maybe something that we would want to consider for next year. I have no idea. Depends on how it turns out at the board.
I'm good with that. Number 18, discuss the video streaming of the meetings at the administration building. I guess we had a memo from Justin.
Yeah, we talked about that at IT committee. However, we're looking at putting equipment in this room for televising some of the meetings. Well, all the meetings are going to be televised, right, Justin? And there's a cost associated with that.
The proposal in front of you is for just under $12,000. That is to utilize the existing technology that we have in here to capture Teams, meetings, or anything that's on the projector in the original sound system. These speakers are from 1996, but for a cost-effective approach, the $12,000 was to add streaming capabilities and recording capabilities. If we have any trouble with the internet, we want to make sure we continue to record it for record retention and keeping. This was a request from the IT committee. Other supervisors have also shown interest in this, and to present a cost-effective, what would it take to stream in this room. There has been discussion about what committees. As you know, all committees do not meet in here right now. So that was after this discussion for what it would take for the equipment in the room. Then future discussions would have to be what board rules would have to change in order to have all committees meet here. And we also talked about staffing, and that was a concern that was brought forward because we have meetings in the evening or all throughout the day. I currently do not have staff that would be monitoring meetings. County clerk would also, with the additional records, was also discussed. But right now in front of you is just the equipment to have the streaming capabilities. Very similar to the county boardroom now. It's actually the same company, same type of technology or devices. It's simplified, meaning somebody would have to come into the room, turn on the sound system, flip a switch to turn on the red lights for recording, then also wait a couple minutes to then hit record and stream on these individual boxes. The laptop that you see up there would also be utilized because we would have to capture a camera, have to capture virtual meetings, presentations, because that's part of committees as well. So we want to bring all of that in. And this dollar amount is for the equipment and services to do so.
Could we facilitate all of the meetings, our committee meetings? We have quite a few.
Yes, we have quite a bit. Few.
Are you gonna make, what, 6 rooms here, or make these into 3 rooms, or how would, I mean, how would you-
Scheduling the meetings would be challenging if it was only in this room. That is one discussion point that we've had previously. So, I think the county clerk would have better.
Yeah, there's a lot of meetings out at HDOT that don't happen down here. I don't know what, when you say all committees, if you're talking about the, in HDOT, Henry Dodge, the committees that are in part, that make up part of Henry Dodge, Human Services, there's a lot of small committees. Judicial Public Protection, the judges meet in the courthouse.
Right.
I'm not telling the judges they have to meet over here.
There was a discussion about what committees, and it would be obviously like the executive, the finance, the services, your HR, the main ones that would potentially have public speaking at. For example, IT, we have not had a lot of public, knock on wood, hopefully we won't, but we welcome that. As Rob knows, our IT meetings are enjoyable. You have to be in IT, I guess, to know that. But, so that's where those meetings were discussed. In terms of the others that are remote, that was something for the board to discuss and consider.
Okay, if you were asking, they back to back, like IT meets in room 1A because this room is usually booked when they have their meeting, if that's what you were asking? Because they run back to back or overtime or one another?
I think we really need to have something in the budget process on what it would cost to staff this, let alone put the,
The potential cost of having to add staff. That's something that each department would have to look at, to see if that would impact them, and I care definitely it would in your department.
Kim, do you have a comment?
Well, I have a couple comments. One is, as this committee and other committees know, the difficulty is often the microphones. And the microphones don't pick up everything. And so I don't think that that is in this proposal. The other concern or issue that I had was the operation of who is gonna staff it? Because I heard Justin say, and I think it's in his memo, that it's going to be up to individual county chair, committee chairs. And I think that really is a lot to put on a committee chair, given that if you've got presentations and you're gonna have to turn it on and off, and if you've got closed session, I think committee chairs may need to have some training on that. And then finally, the scheduling of committee meetings and having them in this room. If you're going to invest that kind of money, then I do think you need, as a county board, to figure out a meeting schedule. If you're gonna have everything in this room, to accommodate all of the committees meeting here. And to me, that's a decision that needs to be made by the executive committee, not the IT committee, and the executive committee and or the county board. And as Justin said, there probably will need to be some rule changes. And finally, you know, I'm not sure which budget the funds would come out of. I don't know if IT department has a slush fund or several dollars to fund this, or,
No slush.
you know, all of the equipment that's being proposed here. But I think to your point, I think it's probably something that needs to be considered as a package and budgeted for in the future.
The one discussion point too is, it would be beneficial to have another room that you can stream in, and that's what this proposal was for as well, and one consideration. If a meeting really needs to be streamed, it can always be scheduled in the county boardroom, and we can stream it there. It doesn't have to be the county board that can stream. We are using the same streaming technology, same subscription. In terms of the budget discussion, I know there is, and this would be a board decision because it's board budget, the laptops that we repurposed, we did have a budget number in there, and that was not used. So that's within the 2022 budget. going forward, we'd have to consider this proposal, but please know there is a second phase proposal of updating the sound system, as the microphones do not capture everything. The first proposal does have an increase versus the little circle microphone over there. It does add something a little bit more capable of capturing the room, but it still isn't a whole system like we did at the county boardroom.
We're gonna need more information too. Now, the question is, who's gonna be responsible for researching and getting the information?
Who brought us this?
It shouldn't be, I mean, it should be your subject matter expert right there, his department.
I'm happy to research more
I mean,
information.
he knows public need, he's familiar with what we already have. He is familiar with the comments that we made. So it would allow him, if he wanted to focus on just one room, this room, whatever it might be, and get the cost for that. What are we talking about? And then we could look at that and make a decision, you know, what are we getting in exchange for that? Are we getting the bang for our buck that we think we're going to get, or that we hope to receive for that, for making and allowing our citizens to have access to us that they don't have right now? Then I would look at how many meetings a day can you accommodate in here?
Yeah, I think these are
And
all
then which
questions.
committees, if we have to narrow it down to committees, which
Do
ones?
you think you can get that together in time for the budget process?
We can definitely get proposals for this space, but if we're considering other spaces and staffing, that's another consideration.
That's another story. I would
Yep.
focus on this. What are we
Just
talking about for
Yep.
this room? Because this room would be, it has so much already.
But I do think you're gonna need to figure staffing and how you're gonna staff it.
Oh, yeah.
The other,
in the budget.
the other concern would be like JPPC, meeting over in the courthouse building all the time. Those judges are in and out of those meetings only when they got free time, and to run over here, I just think that what I'm afraid of what would happen is a number of those different area people that show up at that meeting to give a little report will make it.
Well, when it comes down to committees for pluses and minuses, maybe JPP won't be part of that first group that's gonna be included.
Well, that's
Because
my
there's
concern,
special
is if you're
needs.
gonna force all committees to meet, that'll be a problem.
Oh,
for
no, we
that
would, no,
committee.
we would have to understand what's involved whenever a committee has.
Some of the other ones would be like building, I mean, they move around all the time.
Oh, yeah, I know how they go. In and out.
So that'll have to be one of the considerations.
Yeah, I think these are all things we'd have to look at going
Right.
forward, but if
Exactly.
we get the basics and then we can.
Right, I would go with the basics, what
I
we're
don't think
talking
your
about,
other
we may look at the
committee
figure and go,
needs down
there's
here
no
either.
way, right, not now, we can't afford it, we just can't afford it.
Yep, and phase two was to be presented soon. I still don't have those numbers for this space, but we'll gather that. We'll consider the current schedule of the meetings, which are evening meetings, and how the staffing would look there, and then also possibly remote type of streaming, because there are capabilities, but it takes technical knowledge of be able to operate those equipment. Because once the citizens are used to the service, they will expect it, even though in our disclaimer we say it's for convenience. But it does change the dynamic of
When
what
you give
services
the
we
public
provide.
some technology and they become familiar with it and start using it, they want more. They want a lot more, and that's a good thing, but then it's a double-edged sword, it's good and bad.
Thank you.
And then number 19, my report of the District 24 resignation, I think all of you know that Dennis resigned. We have through tomorrow applications. I currently have 5 applicants. I have asked Supervisor Belt to sit in, and the two of us interview the candidates, hopefully Wednesday and Thursday, if that works out. See how that goes with the candidates and our schedules.
So you plan on having someone hopefully for the next county board?
For the 30th.
Okay,
For the
oh,
30th.
okay.
Because the time we go through any training or anything,
Yeah.
it would be on the 30th. But we have 5 applicants at this point. We do have an item on here, interim county administrator contract extension. Just start the discussion. I had a supervisor come and talk to me about extending a contract for Mr. Houchin. At this point, we would have 8 days of overlap. The question is whether that's enough. So we should talk about that, and then the possibility of maybe going forward with projects that we could use John's talents going forward. But I don't know if we want to get into that now. It's just for everybody to think about and what might want to consider doing going forward. So, do you have any thoughts on that at this point? And we can bring it back on as another at the next meeting. It's just a matter of getting it on everybody's radar that that's a possibility. So,
When is Cameron coming in?
22nd, 2 weeks from today. Then the 30th, we already talked about the 10th. The 30th is the special county board meeting, so it would be strategic planning, the 12 ARPA resolutions, and hopefully a appointment of the new county board supervisor would be the agenda for that meeting. The number 20, we have a little time constraint here. We've had a pretty long meeting already. Would ask each one of you to be brief in your.
All right, I'll go first. All right, so most of you know that I have a work conflict because I got a new job. So on highway, I didn't attend because they not very accommodating on my new work schedule. Information technology, that's Justin hit on the head on what just came forward. And the tax increment finance district, and we talked about the Horicon thing, and I didn't have any other kids this month. I'll have one new one creating in Waupun next, it's the next one.
Supervisor Hendrick is not here, so we'll pass on that one. Dan?
I missed the JPPC meeting, and I didn't get a chance, that was Friday, so I didn't get a chance over the weekend to get a hold of anybody. So passing that one along with court group security, but the building to help meet this week.
Okay, under land and water conservation, they met on the 25th. The committee is working on creating a clean water resolution for our county, and they're going to look at modeling across counties. We're still working on our 10-year plan. The public hearing will be on August 22nd for the 10-year plan. And the other thing, just to mention, in that plan, we made a goal of adding 16,500 acres a year for farmland preservation. Currently, our county has 110,000 acres under farmland preservation out of 330,000. I think it's approximate numbers. So we're trying to make some goals there. UW Extension did not meet in July. And I did go to the WCA Personnel Finance and County Organization Steering Committee meeting in July 13th. So I don't think I need to report those resolutions. getting ready for, convention.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, last,
Now, hang on a second. I'm going
Okay.
to report on audit, because audit supervisor Kim Malloy is not here, but we've been having trouble getting members to attend the audit meetings, so most of the time they have three. They're just barely making their quorum. So we are actually looking into possibly coming back to this committee in the future where we would, in effect, eliminate the audit committee and have those audit items brought as a report to the finance committee and do it through the finance committee. But it's just the start of a discussion. There's nothing.
that makes sense. I've heard that for a number of years as far as the audit committee, yeah, I like that. Thank you. Mine is short. Human resources meeting is tomorrow. It should be interesting. Housing authority I missed. Land resources and parks was supposed to be tonight at 7, and that was canceled. So I have, and Friday I have 2 CWCAC meetings. We are actively, extremely busy, actively looking for a home, a house in Beaver Dam. We had a lot of realtors out, and we've gotten some good contacts. So hopefully we will be in a position to spend our ARPA money. And that's all I have to report right now. Next time I should have more.
The highway committee did go out and tour the Roll Farm at their last meeting. And our plan would be, as a county board, figure out a way to have it open for county board supervisors to see what's out there, and not that we would go out as a group, but we would post it and have it open for a couple hours so board members could go out and see the
Is that the one is that the one by the airport?
By the airport.
Okay.
And, so that everybody would know what we're talking about as we repurpose or sell it or whatever. I've attended a couple of meetings, the county board chairs forum, which was on, a lot of it was on parliamentary procedure and state laws. Today, this morning, we had the resolutions committee for WCA. There's 29 resolutions going to the full board. We made recommendations at the conference.
That's on Sunday, correct?
Yes,
Sunday
that's on Sunday. And I have the list of resolutions here, so if anybody wants to see them or have questions, I can put that on next. And I guess the next thing would be to establish the September executive meeting date and time. Fifth is Labor Day.
I thought we were on with the 12th.
And we had talked about that, but it becomes an issue with finance and getting resolutions before finance.
So like Tim mentioned before, when you follow the finance meeting, you have resolutions to act on, and the finance is gonna look at it first.
But
I mean, it's up to you, if you wanna do it that way, it just makes it.
it's our call, but it would work better for both Karen and Jim, I think, if we could meet the week before, which at that point would be the 6th. Tuesday the 6th.
Any day works for us, it just makes more sense to have your resolution signed, and then they go to finance.
It's always good to have the finance committee meeting as like the last stop before the packet goes out. We're not sending them out, but the last stop for all resolutions and ordinances, because either they're gonna sponsor it or they're gonna sign the fiscal note. And then that leaves them not asking the question question, well, what did the executive committee do? Or what's the, we don't, get to that.
So maybe that's a discussion that we have with finance.
There's no, their agenda, I think, is just adjourned.
They had always met on Tuesday morning. Then they switched to Monday afternoon, or Monday morning, but it was still after all the other committees had, for this committee, I guess, switched. You were always the first Monday of the month. Now you're the second Monday, the same as finance. Just
We're later.
logistically, it's not the best option.
We're later in the day, so.
And you're later in the day.
Andrew's gone on the 6th. So, the rest of the committee feel about meeting on Tuesday, the 6th, to be ahead of finance.
I did.
We got 5:05.
What time are you thinking, Dave?
Well, for Rob, it's 3 o'clock.
At work, 3 o'clock.
Early, right?
That's about the earliest.
And then IT meets at 5, so we would need to keep our agenda moving.
Yes. Mr. Chair. Big Al.
6 now?
All right, we will schedule it for the 6th at 3 o'clock. Future agenda items, I think we had a couple of things that will come out of the minutes we can add to. Anything that you think we should specifically add for future agenda items? We have the possible extension of the interim county administrator. And we also have ARPA committee, how we would move going forward. With that, I will declare the